Welcome to another episode of Shadow School. It's a little dark in my house today. We're in the shadow again as it rains outside. Appropriate given the gene key that we are focused on. Today we're exploring the 15th gene key with the shadow of dullness, the gift of magnetism, and the siddhi or the divine gift of fluorescence. And we're going to get to explore what exactly that means. We have the dilemma of comfort. And here, overall, this 15th gene key is really focused on humanity and keeping us human. It plays this role of keeping us human. And it has to do with our attitude toward everything in life and how that attitude, that underlying attitude, actually shapes our reality. And in fact, we either create our own heaven or our own hell. Two people can be in the very same experience, and one of them feels like they're on their own personal heaven, and one of them feels like they're in their own personal hell. And this is because this is a creation of our mind or projection of reality. And so this gene key really explores what it means to be human, which means from the gene key's perspective, it's like really that being human is kind of like this battlefield, is what it calls it, of oppositional forces. And some of them pull us toward light and heaven, and some of us pull us towards sinking into and like pulled under into darkness and shadow and hell. And that humanity in general is a bridge that consciousness itself works with to oscillate and work out conflict between these different currents of higher and lower vibration and frequency. So dullness in this particular gene key, the shadow that we start with, is all about the ordinariness, mundanity of life that we are living in. The repetition of all of the boring, so dull, tiny, insignificant things we've got to do every day just to keep moving. It's this terror that we have, that we're like fearing that we're locked into this repetition, and the way that we see it in this shadow of dullness is that it's just so miserable and dreary here. And I love that it's raining today, because that's an example of what can affect our attitude. A lack of light, inner light or external light, here in the case of weather, can actually affect our attitude and how we see ourselves and shape our worlds and reality. And so on a day where the light is dimmed and dull and it's raining, it can often have our attitude reflect in us and shape how we are engaging with life and responding to life as a result, also through this shadow of dullness. In this shadow of dullness, we have a stifled imagination. So when I love this imagery of like sinking. And when we sink, it's like that, I believe it's parasympathetic response of freeze. We get into that, oh, it's dorsal vagal. We get into a dorsal vagal response of freeze, of being frozen. It's almost this stasis, this paralysis. And from this perspective, when we're like sunken in there, we can easily move into anxiety. We can easily move into depression and get sunk down even deeper. But what really is happening here is our nervous system almost like locks down in a way to protect us. And as a result, we don't have access to higher functioning. We don't have access to creativity, to ideas. We cannot actually see possibility from this state. And so we have this stifled imagination when we are sinking into this like frozen state of dullness. And what we choose here that keeps us here sometimes is comfort. The gene keys is based on this ancient system called the I Ching. It's an ancient Chinese system of wisdom. And it's also called the Book of Changes. And honestly, as we've been examining, the entire agenda of nature and in the universe is evolution and change. And if we are not changing as humans, then we are not evolving, then we are in a sort of death. We're in a stuckness. We're in this rigidity, this stifled place. And that's when we sink further and further. And so it's kind of offering for us, do we want to be in the comfort of not changing? Or do we want to change and evolve? And so here the dilemma is comfort. It can be much easier, can feel easier to stay in our comfort zone and to resist change, even though that change is what can help us expand and grow, move out of a state of dullness, move out of a state of depression, achieve what we desire most in life, love, connection, living through purpose, impacting and serving others. And so what we're doing here is we are giving away our self-responsibility and choosing comfort instead. And there is a cowardice, there's a shrinking in this comfort that really narrows our field and has us just see only this human experience and this repetitive, ordinary human experience as being so dull, so boring, and we start to resent it. And that's where we're living here in the shadow. The 15th gene key is all about diversity of organic life. This is really a gene key connected into the earth and all life in general, not just humanity. And what we have to discern here is the difference between simplicity and dullness. And our neocortex that we've evolved with as humans our neocortex, it has us really judge things a lot and perceive things and reflect on things very differently than from how other life forms perceive things. So, for example, I've used this example before, but my dogs can lay around all day, every day. Now, of course, they get restless and they want to go exercise and they want to be out of the house, but they're not bored. They're not looking at life as though it's dull. They don't have this subjective layer of interpretation where they want things to be a certain way. And when they aren't that way, they're judging it as being dull, ordinary, and insufficient for what their desire is. They are living life through simplicity. They're living in alignment with life. The humans, on the other hand, with this neocortex and our ability to add layers of interpretation and meaning and new perception and judgment and assessment on life and everything in it and the situations that we're in, if we are seeing things as being so repetitive, so dull, so boring, not what we want them to be, we are attached to things being a certain way. We feel like we should be entertained all the time. Life should always be exciting, or the things that we want to happen aren't happening. And as a result, we view life as being this dull, repetitive, never-ending task list we just have to live out to survive. So you see that difference between simplicity and being, just this being in a state of being, and an attitude of dullness and being in this shadow where all we've done is we've added another layer of subjective interpretation and meaning onto what already exists. And that's where our suffering lives, in that layer of meaning that we have created. Let's talk a little bit about attitude in general. Attitude is not of the mind. So we're not creating it through our minds and our mental process and our thinking. We're not willing to have an attitude that sees life as dull as opposed to extraordinary. Attitude is simply the way that Consciousness is using our awareness in any given moment. It's how we are programming the environment around us, and also how the environment around us then programs our DNA. So it's a little bit to do with epigenetics there. It's linked to hormones, brain chemistry, and our spirit that underlies everything and how we're like connecting into consciousness. But it's not a conscious thought our mind is creating. Our attitude is also not an unconscious thought that's hidden below and impacting everything that we're just not aware of. Our mind definitely can try to rationalize and provide reasons and a description and meaning and interpretation that's in support of our attitude or not. But the attitude is much more like emergence of consciousness working through us in this human vehicle that we have. And it kind of allows us then to affect life's events, and our experience as a result is a mirror of our attitude. So we can change our thinking, and we can definitely shape our attitude, but the attitude is something a little bit more emergent than just like a mental thought construction of this day is good or this day is bad, or whatever it is. So it's still a little bit squishy in there, and I just want us to sit with the discomfort of not being able to grasp onto and fully define and fully put a boundary around what attitude is, and to fully know it with certainty. Just let it be. Because I notice my own tendency here. I'm like, okay, this description still really lacks a lot of crispness to me. It still feels very vague and conceptual and high level, and I'm not entirely sure how to distinguish or discern it from the mind and perception and our unconscious and all of these things. And this is when, in contemplation and gentleness and impatience, in inquiry, the approach of the gene keys overall, those 4 aspects: contemplation, gentleness, patience, inquiry. We just put a pause on the play, and we just allow it to be and allow the concepts to play. And that's it. That's it. We don't have to know. We don't have to figure it out right now. This is not a figure it out moment. It's just starting to play with the concept of attitude. What we find is our attitude kind of then creates this world that we are in. It shapes it for us because it shapes our experience of it. So remember at the beginning, we talked about having a hell or a heaven based on our experience of what's happening in our world and our environment. It's shaped and connected with the attitude that we have, the underlying attitude that we have. Let's dig into, I'm just looking at my notes here. The shadow of dullness manifests when we feel low. So like today, when it's raining like this, I know I'm not particularly affected as much by the seasonal affectation. It gets a little monotonous, like it gets a little dull, but it usually doesn't get me down. But I know other people in their lives where it just raining one day out of 10 sunny days, that day is horrible. Like we can get down. We can be stuck in the shadow of dullness when there's a lack of light, inner or external. We also do a lot of numbing ourselves through technology, through food, through other addictions, and we dull ourselves. We dull our ability to sense and listen internally. We mute our voices, we dim our abilities, we do all kinds of stuff that dull ourselves too. And when we do that, that can have us also manifest a lower feeling and start to be in this lower shadow of dullness. And what we need here is that we need an attitude shift. So sometimes we have to talk about like a mindset shift and like seeing things differently. The attitude shift here is almost like an experience of light that needs to change. So an external experience of light changing would be it being a gorgeous, warm, sunny day. And it literally lights us up inside when this happens. We literally are absorbing the energy from the sun, and the vitamin D and all of these things have an impact on the chemistry of our body and on our attitude. Similarly, we can have an inner light that turns on. Maybe there's a spark of creativity, or we do see the world something differently, or watch an inspiring movie, or hear a story that touches us in a way that connects us back to love and light. We can have an inner light that starts to shift, that starts to then, of course, shift our body chemistry and our attitude. And that's what's required. These shifts of inner or outer light can take the same situation that we're in that we once saw as very dull, and now we see it as exciting and vibrant. You know, when I go outside with my husband, or I'm with my husband and the weather is like this, he's like, done. It just like literally sucks the life out of him. And for me, I go outside and let's say it's an overcast day. What I notice is how much brighter things actually are in color than they appear to be a lot of times when it's a really bright sunny day, and specifically the green stuff. So you can go around and find like moss, and it is the most brilliant green you've ever seen in your life. On tree bark, on the ground, moss is everywhere, and it's astounding. And the brilliance of the green shines through the most when it's a gray day outside, when it's an overcast day outside. So it's like inner light here in this case, and the attitude, the underlying attitude that we have can shape whether we're seeing a gray day or a brilliantly green day. And both of those days are an overcast day. So that's an example here. And the more that we are present and we don't dull ourselves, numb our own senses, we are aware of all that's around us, that's humming around us and springing forth around us. I believe the more there is the mystery and the magic in the mundane, in the tiny, simplest details of life, that we often glaze over, overlook, maybe you couldn't even see before because we're not present to actually what is in front of us. So these perspective shifts are huge, and that's what draws us into this gift of magnetism, which we'll explore in a second. This dullness, though, is based on a lack of magnetism or polarity. So think about like lack of charge, lack of life force, lack of polarity, either side of the pole. There is kind of nothing. There's just like a middle point that's just like very like meh. That's where we are with dullness. And in fact, I think it's really interesting to think about relationships. Like we can have a lot of good, a lot of bad in a relationship. We can have a lot of polarity, and that makes it exciting and vibrant in a way, even if it's not particularly healthy or beneficial to either one of us. There can be a lot of chemistry charge in a relationship that does not have you perceive it as being dull. But then there can be relationships where if you have the attitude and a lack of inner light, there's nothing tumultuous happening here. You know, there's nothing like brilliance on either end of the spectrum happening. It just is. And we can view those people in those relationships that we have as being dull. They're not dull. There just was not like a huge polarity there that existed between your energies in the moment, and your perception of them is this dullness. That same person in another relationship may have huge polarity, and as a result be seen as very magnetic. Like it's just very interesting to think about this in relationship. All shadow states. I love this gene key because it is one of those that is very fractal. If you think about it, it contains all other gene keys inside of it. So all shadow states, like we've been exploring, can have dullness at their core. A view where we're like not able to like see it, and how we respond to the shadow is what has it be dull in our perception. And at the same time, this gene key contains in it all of like the magic expansion on the other end with the Siddhi and all gene keys and all Siddhic states, the flowering of all Siddhic states, which we'll talk about. So this gene key is like very interesting in that it can kind of like contain all others. So how do we move from, well, let me put a pause on that. Let's explore repressive and reactive, and then we'll talk about how do we move from dullness into magnetism. Okay, so that's a fun one. So first we have the repressive expression of the shadow of dullness, and it's called empty. And here we feel very stuck and restless. And there is like a sense of sinking that like really takes us down the path toward depression. There is a feeling, an underlying energy of giving up here. Like you've got nothing. Like there's just nothing left to fight. There's no energy left to like see even all of the amazing things that surround you. And there's a negative acceptance. So we'll talk about acceptance here in a bit, but there's a negative acceptance of your situation and your reality, your heaven or your hell that you're living in this perspective. So it's a sense of resignation. You're like resigned to the state. So you're not actually accepting something in a loving way or even a neutral way. You're like negatively accepting. So you're resigned. You're like, guess there's like, it kind of goes to pessimism, which we explored in an earlier gene key. It's like, there's nothing I can do about this. I'm kind of just stuck here and I give up. Like I relent. And what happens here is that we have to discover the fear that is preventing us from moving deeper into emptiness, deeper into the mundanity, deeper into the simplicity and the dullness of life. Why are we struggling to accept it? What comes forward for me here is the elixir of gratitude. I would say the people here cannot perceive the gifts in their life, the enormity of the wealth that surrounds them in the mundane. And so there's no sense of gratitude or wealth for the life that they're in. The attitude is really just one of lack. So to me, that emptiness is a feeling of lack here, of scarcity, of not having, and being like, fine, I'll just not have, or I just, can't live this way, or I'll never have the thing that I want. And so I kind of give up. But what we need here is to actually move deeper into emptiness and start to examine and explore what is behind us, what is behind the fear that we have that is keeping us in this state. Is it a lack of self-worth and deservingness? Is it simply the attitude that we've got, the orientation to life where we just really cannot see what's right in front of us in all of its glory and simplicity? What is it? But when we can actually move into a state of loving acceptance around this and actually explore the fears that lie beneath this feeling of lack and empty, then we have a huge surge of energy that can be released, that can kind of like pop us out, increase that inner light, and help us shift the attitude out of dullness into magnetism. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have the reactive expression. So this is where it's more extroverted, more anger focused usually. The energy is projected outward into the world. And here in the shadow of dullness, the reactive expressive state is extremist. This is where we rebel against dullness. We don't accept it. Life is boring and I am not here for that. So I'm going to deny it. and I'm going to escape as much as possible. And so we move from one experience to another with no rhyme or reason, with no purpose. We are just like on to the next thing, because the second that we spend one moment too long in this spot, we are bored, life sucks, and we are moving on and moving forward. And here, people are unable to commit. We're running from our own shadows. And in our relationships, this can express in not being able to be with any person for a length of time. Not only can we not commit, but we have so much pent up rage and energy here, so much anger here, that when we are around others for a long time, that dullness and that like angst and that attitude and lack of light expresses itself outwardly. And so it makes our relationships go away, even if we weren't running from them in the first place. What the elixir is here when we are in the extremist reactive state of the shadow of dullness is that we have to see through our own patterns of reaction and take responsibility and accept what we are running from. So in empty, we were trying to really understand what the fear was that was preventing us from seeing the beauty of everything around us, from feeling so empty, even though we are surrounded by so many gifts and so much wealth in this life, even when it seems simple and mundane. In the extremist reactive expression of the shadow of dullness, we have to see through our own crap. We have to see through our own patterns. We have to see where we are being reactive and accept what we're running from. So here there's a fear too. There's a reason why we're running. There's a reason why we're uncomfortable in the stillness, in the simplicity, where we're always trying to seek out polarity, where we're trying to seek out interest and big experiences that entertain us for small moments, but they're fleeting and they never stay. To me, this feels a little bit like adrenaline junkie, if I could summarize it. Like that to me, I feel like is an interesting expression of this state, this extremist state, where it's like life is dull. I can't like figure out a way to get dopamine anymore. The phone's not doing it. Winning a big deal at work or getting a promotion is not doing it. My relationships are not doing it. So now I'm going to do death-defying stunts. I'm going to go jump out of a plane, like ski, hella ski of a mountain, all these things. And then you get what you're looking for there. You get like that surge, and but it doesn't last long. It doesn't last like at all. So the problem is then we keep chasing that until we can stop and see that we've been chasing something that is not lasting or sustainable and might even be perilous to our lives. And we have to actually see what's underneath. Why are we running? Why are we trying to get this feeling in our lives? And so to move out of the shadow of dullness into the gift of magnetism, there's not really a place for you to go. There's not anywhere to move. It's simply a new attitude and a new perspective. It's like bringing the technicolor into the black and white. And in order for us to do that, we have to embrace the dullness. We have to embrace the ordinariness of life, the fact that it is simple and repetitive, but there's a lot of mystery in it if we actually look closer. The more we embrace the dullness, the more mysterious it becomes. The more we can actually experience emptiness. And I don't mean emptiness like we had in the repressive state where it's experienced as lack, but I mean emptiness as in like a great fertile void state, where we actually recognize that life itself is meaningless. Now, what we do with this truth of life is meaningless is what shapes our reality. If we see life as meaningless and we're in a shadow of dullness, and we have an attitude of lack or extremism or whatever it is, we're going to manifest our hell on earth. everything is going to suck. We're going to be miserable. We're going to sink into anxiety and depression. We're going to be trapped in the mind and like making stories up. We're going to be arguing with everybody. We're going to have no close relationships. And it doesn't matter anyway because life is meaningless. Like you can see that line of reasoning going down that pathway. If instead you have an attitude, you're full of inner light, and you see that life is meaningless, which means we can create something extraordinary here. There is no there. There is no place for you to get to. There is no job for you to have. Working and earning a living is ridiculous as a concept. What actually does have meaning is what meaning you make out of it. So in the gift of magnetism, we move toward accepting life is meaningless. It's mundane. It's ordinary and repetitive. But there's so much gift here in recognizing this and accepting it. If we allow this to permeate, everything ceases to be dull. Because then what happens is it's basically your playground. And I don't mean your playground like extract everything, burn the earth to the ground. That to me is more in the shadow of dullness. I mean, this is your playground, like you start to step into and become more and more magnetic because you are aligned with the heartbeat of everything, because you are trusting in the rhythms and the patterns that exist. So let's talk about that. We can create our state of paradise through ordinariness if we're stepping into this gift of magnetism. So first we have to understand a little bit, like, what am I actually talking about with magnetism? Let me get some cacao here for a second. And the Gene Keys offers up the concept of Schumann resonance. I don't know if you've ever heard of this or not, but the scientists discovered that there is a vibration in the earth and all living organisms in the electromagnetic field that kind of holds all living organisms in a similar heartbeat and rhythm. And this is called Schumann resonance. It's named after the man that discovered it. And basically, what this resonance does is it actually binds us all together, all living organisms, into one living organism. And here we're just so inherently connected to Gaia, to the earth, and our existence with all other living organisms on the earth. Like we're one organism. So what's beautiful about this Gene Key is not only is it all about what makes us human, it's all about nature, diversity of nature, and connecting to the earth, being in harmony with the heartbeat of the earth and all other organisms. And the more that we can move toward being in resonance with that heartbeat of everything, the more magnetic we become. What's interesting here is that it provides a challenge for us as humans because the Schumann resonance and earth and all of organic life is operating usually at a very different pace than how we perceive as humans through our neocortex and all the things that we think we have to do. We're operating in a frequency and a pace of busyness and hurry. Gaia and the Schumann resonance and all living organisms are not in a hurry. And so to become more in resonance overall with the heartbeat of everything in our nature that we're a part of, we actually have to slow down. And I love this so much. Gene Keys offers that Gaia, the earth, moves with the speed of greenness. And I feel like I've referenced this already, but in another episode, but I'm going to pull it forward again. If you're a tea drinker, you've gotten one of those tea bags that says like nature is never in a hurry and yet everything is accomplished or everything gets done. That's the idea here. Moving at the speed of greenness. We are not in a hurry. Everything unravels according to the time in which it should unravel. And here you can see the ordinariness, the underlying rhythms, the repetitions actually start to have a vibrancy and a life to them that we were not able to see in the shadow of dullness, that we can see but also tap into and align with in the gift of magnetism. More in resonance, more magnetic, trusting in the natural ebb and flow. The shadow has us experience this slowing down, this lack of hurry and urgency as dullness. But when we're in the gift of magnetism, when we actually come into resonance with this heartbeat, with Schumann resonance, time kind of ceases to exist, and we're just in a state of being. We're in a natural state of being. And here we have a huge attitude shift. Dullness is no longer dull. It's vibrant. The moss is the most brilliant green, you know? I love this so much because I used to have a favorite season, and it was always fall. You know, I loved the layering and the coziness and the boots and the clothes and the fact that the trees turn and they were beautiful, and it was like a crisp, cool air. It wasn't super hot. And there, you know, there's so many things I loved about autumn and fall. And then I moved out from the city to the middle of nowhere in rural Illinois. And after 1 year of living here with my 3 acres of land and the little permaculture community that's around us, I had a very new favorite season. It was spring. And it's funny because experiencing spring in the city, I experienced it through the attitude of dullness, through the shadow of dullness. Everything was gray. It was always raining, which was miserable. The temperature was unpredictable. You had to wear 15 layers. Half the time you were cold, half the time you were hot, most of the time you were wet from the rain. It was horrible. It was like a dreary, wet extension of winter, which was also awful in the city. And I hated spring. I did not like it at all. I was looking forward to when it turned into summer, and only then did I care about it. The flowers were nice, but mostly like, you know, I'm thinking that's happening closer to summer. That was my perception. When I lived here, out in the country, I started to notice all the tiny changes, the buds, the flowering, the timing of everything in the springtime, the beginnings of things like breaking open, waking up, sprouting forth, the activity of the animals and the other life forms and living beings around you. On a warm enough day, the bees would be out and you could get to hear them. You hadn't heard a bee in months. So much life, so much springing forward in what I had previously perceived as dullness. So much green, brilliant green springing forward. Summertime, things are like this, you know, like darker, luscious green here. Springtime, they're like a yellowy, bright, brilliant green. The daffodils coming forth, the irises coming forth, the little violets in the grass changing from brown to green. First it goes into this mixture, and then the green overwhelms it, and you no longer see the brown anymore. The sun getting longer every day, the darkness getting shorter every day, increasingly. So many vibrant, beautiful things to notice in the ordinariness. This is when we start to notice and we get into harmony with everything happening in its own timing at the speed of greenness and the gift of magnetism, instead of seeing spring through this lens of dullness like I did before. So let's talk about this a little bit and what magnetism actually means. Magnetism is not the same as charisma. Charisma is an external kind of view of someone. You've seen somebody that's kind of like larger than life and they have a great personality that attracts other people. That's kind of charisma. Magnetism resides in a much deeper place inside of oneself. It's rooted in being connected to and in resonance with natural rhythms. It is an attractive force and it is a life force, but it resides much deeper than like a personality charisma. Because there can be people that are actually living quite simple lives that are not boisterous or loud, or their personalities attract others. And yet they carry with them a sense of magnetism that draws people, opportunities, synchronicities, other things toward them naturally. A lot of very humble people out there, very magnetic through their service, through giving endlessly. Magnetism, therefore, is really a gift of loving. It's a gift of being able to love and enjoy everything about life, every tiny little detail. You want to explore the birds and learn more, the trees, the moss, the flowers as they bloom in spring, this book, this concept, this wisdom system. You literally just want to run and dive into every pool and puddle and rabbit hole that you can to learn and experience every little detail about life. This is also someone who loves and accepts themselves and others as they are through the heart. So we have the gift of magnetism. We are not seeing others and their patterns as things that are dull, repetitive, or things that we have to change, or we want them to be different. We accept others as they are, and we see the natural diversity and the beauty of how different all of us are. Here in this gift, there's no separation between mystical and mundane. And even the most boring, simple, everyday issue or task or relationship is an opportunity for transformation. I love this line. I wrote it down from the Gene Keys book. Great spiritual trials are not met in the extremes, but in the everyday. I think we can all agree with that. That's why it's so challenging when we have holidays with our family. It's like the everyday thing is we're sitting in the kitchen, we're standing in the kitchen and we're washing dishes and one person is saying something, the other one's like, oh my God, this is so triggering. Like that's it. Like it's happening while you're washing dishes. It's not happening while something extraordinary is going on, this transformation. It happens in the tiny everyday details of our lives. Being present to them is what allows us to use and work with them as our curriculum for transformation. And magnetism here is being the power to influence and be influenced by the aura. So that's another piece that comes through here, is that magnetism and the gift of magnetism has a lot to do with our energetic field and our aura. Being the power to influence and being influenced by the aura. So many of us are leading with and trying to manipulate and influence through the mind, trying to change the world and other people through our mind, through force. And really, in the gift of magnetism, we are attracting, but we are also creating a ripple effect through the energetics of our magnetic auric field, which is really like projected out and rooted in our heart center. This is when we start to move toward the Siddhi of Florescence. And Siddhi, divine gift of fluorescence, it, like I was saying earlier, how in the shadow of dullness, every shadow in the Gene Keys is rooted in, can be seen there in an aspect of dullness. Just like every gene key can be seen as a flowering of a state of being and unity through this concept of fluorescence. Fluorescence meaning like a spontaneous bursting into a flower or a flowering. And in fact, in nature, the definition is more like envisioning a bush or a tree that has buds all over it, and all of a sudden it's just time and they all open and the whole tree is blooming. That's fluorescence. So if we think about this on the human level, on an energetic level, on a DNA epigenetic level, we see that there's this process of flowering, of unfolding, of bursting forth energy that's just beautiful. It's the zenith of magnetism. So when we like flower, it's like a symbol of enlightenment. What I love that the Gene Key says in the book that made me go, oh, when I read it was, your higher self represents your ultimate flowering. And I love this, of course, because I'm creating in the world this concept of higher self leadership and having your higher self be in communion with and merged with your human being, and the concept of higher self and self leadership coming together to really anchor in peace and unconditional love through how we lead our lives and show up in the world. And here to read this simple sentence of your higher self represents your ultimate flowering was just so beautiful to receive as I was reading this Gene Key. On that level, but also because in doing some discovery and deepening into the meaning of the sound within my name, Brian Elise Miller, what I have discovered is that, and interpreted as the meaning of Brian Elise Miller in totality, meaning she who allows the flowering of wisdom through strength, truth, and vulnerability. So this flowering, this bursting forth, this allowing of flowering to take place, and it being connected and representing the ultimate flowering as your higher self. When I read all of this, you can imagine it was just like, boo, like a whole light dawning inside. What is important to note here is that there is not a guaranteed pathway to make this happen. There is no guaranteed path or process to enlightenment, to triggering a fluorescence flowering in your life, to achieving a Siddhic state of energetic frequency. These things happen spontaneously. We access these states spontaneously. We can't make them happen. We cannot force them to happen. We cannot will them to happen. But what we can do is we can work in this gift of magnetism, have inner light more and more come through, be surrounded by external light more and more, get into the resonance of the heartbeat of everything that's living and be one with all of the rhythms of nature. And when we are comfortable there, simply being who we are, accepting ourselves and others as they are, we're getting close to flowering. We're close to fluorescence. Fluorescence is on the verge. Now, when it will happen, who knows? But it's experienced when our awareness comes to rest in that feeling of being natural. We explored this naturalness in another Gene Key. I believe it was the 10, the shadow of self-obsession, the gift of naturalness, the city of being. It's when we stop seeking that we can rest. And only then can this flowering take place, this fluorescence, this exponential bursting forward can take place. This reminds me of another example from my own property in the springtime, which is that I noticed that the trees don't all burst burst forward at once. There are several that do. There are several that come early. And in fact, it usually starts with bushes. Usually I can look outside and the honeysuckle bushes are bright green. They've gone from being brown to being bright green. The whole thing is just like this brilliant green. And then I notice, a lot of trees actually have their buds on when they drop their leaves in the winter. So all winter long, I've been noticing buds, like for example, on this maple tree in my backyard. It's covered in buds. It has been all winter. I don't know if anybody notices that or not. And when it bursts forward, this little maple tree, its tiny leaves unfurl, and they're like, oh my God, they're tiny. They're like this big when they first burst forward, and they're pink. They're not green yet. They have like a haze of yellowish green, but when they first pop out of the bud, they're like this blush pink color. And then it's like a whole extra month until the oak trees burst forward. But when they do, it's all at once too. Everything is on its own timing. But when all of the oak trees are it's time, they're all bursting forward at the same time. When all the maple trees are ready to open with these little pink leaves, these delicate, like fuzzy pink leaves, they all open on the tree all at once. That's fluorescence. When the asparagus decides it's going to spring forward, I can now see it all over my property popping up at once, even though these things don't look like they're connected from the surface. We won't get into mycelia network, but we know that they're connected some way, but they're connected through rhythms and many other things. This is true, and the reason why I share this is because this is true with humans flowering and experiencing fluorescence and enlightenment as well. It's usually not an isolated incident. There are usually groupings of humans that are experiencing the flowering at the same time. There's like a rhythm to consciousness. For those that are at a certain readiness, I don't know if I would use the word readiness, but I suppose acceptance and naturalness is what the Gene Key suggests. That they're ripe for flowering. And then flowering occurs. It's not just them, it's others. It's like little lights on a map. Trying to see if there's anything else I'd love to share from fluorescence. Oh. It's just this beautiful sentence that deep harmony frees us to behave spontaneously. We are so stuck in forcing things, scheduling things, booking things on our calendar. We don't have much time for spontaneity. And we're also decoupled from trust and harmony with the greater heartbeat, the rhythms of nature. So it makes it very difficult for us to act spontaneously, but in a way that is purposeful and connected. And here, what I love about this is that when we can get in this deep harmony and resonance with life, but also acceptance with our own natural state, that then it frees us up to be spontaneous. This kind of reinforces one of the concepts we've been talking about as we've explored like self-obsession and obscurity and a couple of other gene keys related to the seeking of ourselves, the individuation of ourselves, and then the releasing of that and kind of the burning away of not being attached to the uniqueness of ourselves anymore. It's a little bit like that. When we can know ourselves enough such that we are comfortable and relaxing into the naturalness of being, we can let go of how we need to show up a certain way, and we can simply be spontaneous because we're in harmony with everything. I think that's such a gorgeous sentiment to leave you with. If you're interested in seeing if this gene key, fluorescence, is in your hologenetic profile, go to genekeys.com, get your free profile. If you would like to deepen your understanding of this or the gene keys in your chart, I'm actually building out an audio library that will help you contemplate through your activation sequence, where we'll do an introduction to the system, how your hologenetic profile works, what the activation sequence is, the positioning of the gene keys in your specific activation sequence. It's custom to you based on your birth date, time, and location, your astrology. This particular gene key, the 15, tends to come about during the summer solstice period when there is the greatest greenness bursting forth on the planet, in at least this hemisphere. And it's when each key has a position within the arc of the year. Imagine like a big wheel. And every one of these 64 gene keys is charted on this wheel. And the wheel is turning. And it's in relation to different planets and positions based on when and where you were born. And this gene key of fluorescence tends to be in around the summer solstice. If you're interested in knowing what your kind of genetic astrology is related to the gene keys and how to work with those gene keys and contemplate them in your life, send me a DM on Instagram or LinkedIn, because I'm working on building out an audio library where I can pull together and curate the content that makes sense for you based on your chart and give it to you in an organized audio playlist that you can use for perpetual contemplation and always refer back to. This is like an alternative to doing a profile reading where you dump a whole bunch of information on somebody in a Zoom call and then leave, then skedaddle. Like, we're doing the opposite of that, where you have the tools in a very organized, tangible way to refer back to as you continue to grow and expand and revisit them over time and see what new things are resonating with you as a result. So if you're interested in that, I'm offering the activation sequence at a really special rate of $66 while I'm building out the library. If you're interested, send me a DM, Instagram or LinkedIn, or you can email me at Brian, which is my first name, at museandmethod.com, all spelled out. And if you are interested in diving more into and applying Gene Key's wisdom into your life and actually bringing it into how you show up as a leader in the world, I have designed a 6-week program called Beautiful Boundaries for rising but highly independent female leaders who struggle to set boundaries, struggle to say no, struggle to ask for and receive help, create so much energetic armor in their lives and so much physical distance from others. They're not experiencing intimacy or connection. We're going to go to work on that together, and we're going to use Gene Key's wisdom to help us as one of the ways that we're going to get there. We're going to build beautiful boundaries together that help you grow connection, do your work, find the information and the treasure that's living inside of your triggers, move outside of your comfort zone and actually take on the work that is shown to you and the conflict and the tension that you experience in your life, and cultivate a sense of inner peace. If you're interested in that, you can sign up for the program. The first 5 women get 50% off. That's at museandmethod.com/boundaries. The link is, of course, in my bio if you need it. I hope I will see you there. Our live calls are starting on April 5th. So we've got a little bit of time there to get some ladies enrolled in the program, but I'd be really honored if you would take that journey with me. And until then, I'll see you all tomorrow with the 16th episode of Shadow School. And enjoy your day, whether it is sunny or shady and overcast. Trying to find the mystery in the mundane today, the vibrance and the energy in what you feel is dull. Sit with the wealth that surrounds you. Find some inner light by practicing gratitude and shifting your attitude. Shifting your attitude through gratitude. I'm sure somebody has already rhymed that in life, but I just recognized it for myself. So I'm just going to take a proud moment there. Shift your attitude through gratitude. That's all. I'm going to leave it on that one. That's a high note. I'll see you all tomorrow.